Today, we're diving into the story of the last emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful empires in all of history. And believe me, the way it all ended is probably not what you're imagining.
I mean, think about it. How does a civilization that basically dominated the known world for centuries, famous for its unstoppable legions, its brilliant laws, its incredible engineering, how does all of that just stop? It's a massive question, but the answer, well, it's surprisingly small. Because the Western Roman Empire didn't go out in some epic world-ending battle. Nope. Its final chapter closed with a teenager who was, for all intents and purposes, an emperor in name only. So let's paint a picture. The year is 476 AD. The Western Roman Empire, which was once this huge, sprawling superpower, is now just a shadow of what it used to be. It's shrinking, it's chaotic, and it's basically on life support. And who's on the throne? A kid. And here's where it gets wild. The irony of his name is just incredible. Romulus Augustulus. His first name, Romulus, was the name of the mythical founder of Rome itself. And his second name, Augustus, belonged to the very first and probably the greatest Roman emperor. He literally had the names of Rome's legendary beginning and its absolute peak. But here's the thing. Nobody actually called him Augustus. Everyone called him Augustulus, which basically means little Augustus in Latin. And it wasn't a term of endearment. It was a nickname to make fun of him, a clear sign that nobody, not the people, not the army, nobody, took this kid emperor seriously at all. And you know what? They had a point. His entire reign lasted less than a year. He was just a footnote at the very end of a long, messy decline. So if this kid wasn't really in charge, who was? Well, that brings us to the guy who was actually calling the shots, the man pulling all the strings from behind the curtain. His own father. This guy's name was Orestes. He was a very powerful Roman general with a pretty wild resume. He'd even worked for Attila the Hun at one point. So in 475, Orestes leads a rebellion, kicks out the old emperor, and takes over. But instead of making himself emperor, he puts his young son Romulus on the throne. Why? It was a political move. He thought it would make his power grab look more official and win over the Roman elites. Romulus was just a puppet. Orestes was the real power. But Orestes, for all his clever planning, had one giant, ticking time bomb of a problem that he just could not solve. The very army that was supposed to be defending Rome. You see, by this point, the Roman army wasn't exactly Roman. It was mostly made up of mercenaries. These are professional soldiers, mostly from Germanic tribes, who are basically hired guns. Their loyalty isn't to some grand idea of Rome. It's to their commander, and more importantly, to their paycheck. And these mercenaries felt like they were owed. Big time. So they made this absolutely massive demand. They wanted 1/3 of all the land in Italy to be given to them. For Orestes and what was left of the Roman government, this was just impossible. There was no way. And that refusal was the final straw. When Orestes said no, the mercenary army didn't just grumble and go back to their barracks. They united behind their own leader, a really smart and tough Germanic chieftain named Odoacer. And Odoacer was ready to take what he wanted by force. What happened next was fast, it was brutal, and it would change the course of Western history forever. The final showdown went down in Ravenna, which was the capital of the Western Empire at the time. Odoacer's takeover was like a blitz. His troops named him their king. He started capturing key cities, and then, in late August of 476, he captured and executed Orestes, the real power behind the throne. With Orestes gone, the road to the capital and to the boy emperor was wide open. And that brings us to this quiet, anticlimactic moment. In September 476, with Odoacer's army basically at the front door, the teenage emperor Romulus Augustulus formally surrendered. He handed over the crown and the special purple robes that were the symbols of all Roman imperial power. But then, something totally unexpected happened. The normal fate for a defeated emperor was, well, execution. But Odoacer spared the boy's life. The story goes that he just felt sorry for him. So Romulus was sent away to a fancy villa to live in a comfortable retirement with a huge yearly pension to boot. The very last emperor of Rome just retired and lived out the rest of his days in quiet luxury. So you might be thinking, was this all just the fault of one kid, his ambitious dad, and a rebel general? And the answer is, not even close. The story of Romulus is really just the final scene in a play that had been going on for a very, very long time. The empire's foundations had been cracking for centuries. For starters, like we saw, the military was totally broken. Rome couldn't get enough of its own citizens to join the army, so it had to rely on these mercenaries who had zero loyalty to the empire itself. And when the government went bankrupt and couldn't pay them, well, that army turned on its own bosses. And why was the government broke? Because the economy was an absolute disaster. We're talking crushing taxes on regular people, crazy inflation that made money basically worthless, and trade routes that were too dangerous to use. The whole system was just grinding to a halt. And you can't run an empire if you're out of cash. So the Western Roman Empire is gone. What does that actually mean for the world? What happens when a superpower that has been around for centuries just disappears? Okay, first, and this is a really important point to remember, when we say the fall of Rome, we're only talking about the western half of the empire. The Eastern Roman Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, was doing just fine. Its capital was in Constantinople, it was wealthy, it was powerful, and it would keep going for another 1,000 years. But yeah, for the West, 476 AD was the end of the road. And this timeline just shows how fast it all fell apart at the end. In August, Orestes is executed. By early September, Odoacer takes the capital. A couple weeks later, Romulus is out of a job. And by the end of the year, the official imperial crown was literally packed up and shipped off to the emperor in the east, which was a symbolic way of saying, yeah, we're done here. It's kind of amazing, right? After 400 years of epic conquests and larger-than-life leaders, it all ends quietly, with an abdication and some paperwork. The Roman Empire in the West was officially over. But here's the thing to always remember. The end of one thing is always the beginning of something else. When Roman authority collapsed in the West, it created this huge power vacuum, and into that vacuum rose new kingdoms, new cultures, and a brand new chapter in history that we now call the Middle Ages. So maybe the real question isn't just how an empire falls, but what always rises from its ashes.